and stop sharing, figure out how to do that. And then share this screen instead.
And do you want questions during or at the end?
No, well, we've actually got a Q&A at the end, so let's keep it at that for now. There we go. How's that?
And perfect. Do you want questions during or at the end? Sorry, ignore that. Okay, perfect. So, great. You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Let's do it.
All right, mate. Hello, everybody joining. We'll just give it a few minutes and then we'll get started. Oh, sorry. One second. You just want to, it always interests me just to see where everybody's calling in from. So if you just want to put in the chat pane where you're calling in from today, but joining us from today, be great to see. Charlie, welcome back. Nice to see you. Beautiful Surrey. Ollie, thanks for joining. Beshad, nice to see you, mate. Hey, Joe. Catherine, Thomas, thanks for joining, everybody. We'll just give it a couple more minutes to let a couple more people join, and then we'll get started. Where are you calling in from today, Guy?
I'm locked down in northwest London. So yeah, I haven't really left these four walls in about 14 months so far. So
whereabouts in northwest?
I'm in Hendon, bottom of the M1, and most people know it for Brent Cross.
Yeah. My wife is from Kensal Green, and I went to university in Brunel, so I know the northwest quite well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're blessed with we live near a park and got a garden, so can't really complain. Although my base brain is constantly trying to figure out a way of getting out the house.
Decent airfield or air museum there as well, isn't there?
Yeah. Although it's been closed for over a year, but yes, we used to take the kids to the RAF museum all the time.
Nice. All right. So I think that's probably just about enough time. So I will give you a quick intro, Guy, and then you can take it away.
Fantastic.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first in our series of the Rev-Ops webinars. For me, Rev-Ops is one of the most exciting places to be playing at the moment. There's an awful lot of traction and fun to be had with something that ultimately makes sense. So once Guy's gone through this, you'll actually start to see how the pieces fit within your business and structure. So for me, it's one of those areas that you can get a lot of traction out of quite quickly, which obviously makes it exciting. Today, we're kicking off with the answer to the question most of us have had in the past few months: what is Rev-Ops? With me today and dishing out his expertise is Guy Rubin. Guy is the founder and CEO of Ebsta, the revenue intelligence platform for HubSpot and Salesforce customers. What qualifies him to talk about Rev-Ops? Well, Ebsta gathers real-time pipeline trends, sales engagement, and historical performance to help sales leaders confidently predict their forecast. And with over $100 billion of deal insight across 1,000 customers, you can assume he knows the space pretty well. You're going to learn a lot from him today, and I can say that with confidence because I have seen his slides. And just before I hand over to Guy, a quick bit of housekeeping. We'll be using the Q&A panel for questions, so anything you want to ask, please add them in there, and you'll see it down in the bottom center of your screen. So any questions you've got in there, put in there, because it means that we can prioritize them and make sure that we do answer them once Guy's gone through his presentation. And throughout, use the chat. So if you've got comments, you want to engage more, absolutely throw them in there, because it's what makes these sessions more interesting for us and for you. You will get way more out of it if you're commenting in the chat as we're going along. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Guy. Guy, welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I'm looking forward to today's session. Got lots of activity through LinkedIn today. Lots of people interested in today's event. So yeah, hoping everyone gets a lot of value from it, and yeah, looking forward to the questions at the end as well. So I'm going to start by just with a quick introduction. So I founded Ebsta in 2012, and Ebsta has evolved into what we call a revenue intelligence platform. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. I've been in B2B SaaS now for just over 20 years, and we've helped thousands of companies over the years build revenue engines. And it's all about trying to build these predictable revenue growth models. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's start with the big question. So this is what everyone is talking about in 2021. What is Rev-Ops? What does it mean? Where does it come from? And is it just a support function, or is it a bit more than that? So I suppose in its simplest format, we see that Rev-Ops is just about joining up all of the commercial organization across the business. So most organizations today will have marketing teams, they'll have sales teams and customer success. And in reality, they're all talking to the same customer. And what we find is that they're all talking in a slightly different way, using slightly different terminology, definitely using different tools, different data sources. And this is causing a lot of pain across these organizations. So Rev-Ops is about bringing up that alignment together. This is all about effectively a good Rev-Ops function is almost like building an orchestra and trying to get everyone playing the same song at the same time. And if we can do that correctly, the results are astounding. So we talk a little bit about how we can bring these different departments together, but the purpose of doing this and is really about joining up that customer life cycle. So trying to have a consistent approach to the way we talk to the customer, the way we run our processes, and the technology that we use, so that everyone is accountable for the same results. So hopefully that helps to try and clear up the basics. So why is it growing so fast? And is it real? Well, you'll see here for some of these stats, we've seen a huge increase already this year in the number of jobs advertised around revenue operations on LinkedIn. And I don't think I've spoken to a company that's not investing in, certainly in the B2B side, that's not investing heavily in what we now call revenue operations. This is by far and away the most important change that we're seeing companies go through kind of during and post-pandemic. And really, we're seeing that this is a strategic part of the business. So we are, I know, for example, in our organization, our Rev-Ops function sits alongside our Chief Revenue Officer. So this is not a function of sales. If anything, sales is a function of revenue operations. And in fact, needs to be controlled and managed through revenue operations so that you can have that consistent approach. So why bother, right? We've had marketing operations for a while. We've got sales ops. Why would we bring it all together? And hopefully the reason is pretty obvious, right? The impact in getting this synergy right is substantial, and you can see this across the board as you look at some of these stats that we've picked out from a number of different researchers. But the impact that you can have through using your existing resources to achieve substantial revenue growth is huge. So this isn't about spending more money, or in fact, if anything, this is about being a lot more efficient with the resources that you've got. But there's no reason why you can't achieve, high double-digit, if not triple-digit growth if you can get this engine operating and the orchestra all singing the same song or playing the same song as they go. So when we talk a little bit about where it's come from, the whole world has become used to paying for things over a period of time. So in the old world, when I first got into software sales, over 20 years ago now, deals were done at the top. People would spend their money, and then you kind of left the customers alone. And now the world has changed around us, and we're all very familiar with the everything as a service world that we live in. So this has actually helped to drive the change and the requirement for revenue operations, because actually, when we look at how the modern buyers go through their journey, they've got no they're insisting upon a hyper-personalized service. They want to know that they're getting a consistent experience, whether it's through the marketing that they're digesting, the sales process they're going through, or when they do start spending some money with you, the amount of money they're spending with you happens on once the deal is done is actually a tiny fraction of the whole customer life cycle, of the value you can get from the customer during their life cycle. So you need to have that consistent, high quality, consistent service all the way through, and they need to have a consistent message coming from them, whoever is servicing them, whether it's sales, service, or sales, marketing, sales, or customer success. And that's the way SaaS now recognizes its revenue. Okay, we have a lifetime value of a customer now rather than an ultimate deal value. And if you get it wrong, the customers have no loyalty to stick around. There's no reason why the customers can't go to a competitor, very, very quickly today. If anything, whatever USP you think you have in your service or your product, the truth is your competitors can replicate it easier and cheaper than they've ever been able to do before. So really, you've got to get this customer journey and this experience that the customer is having all the way through that journey consistent and high quality and hyper personalized, because the buyers are more mature than they ever have been. So as we look at the way the organization was structured before something like Rev-Ops was brought in, and we can see that things are siloed. We have marketing departments that have their own data set that they're working from, their own technology and processes. We've got sales teams doing exactly the same, insisting on their own tools and working in their own way. And then customers get handed over to customer success. And then once again, they will go on their own journey and have their own experience with the customer. Now, in the new world, what we're finding with Rev-Ops in play is that actually this is all just one single function. And what that means, so for example, in our business, we're a self-funded startup, or scale up these days, but every penny we spend on marketing is very important for us. And so rather than marketing being an independent function of sales and success, we invest our marketing dollars in trying to make a brand and a thought leader out of everyone in our sales team and everyone in our customer success team, and really trying to join up the message that they're bringing to market. The other thing, the obvious other conclusion you'll get from this graphic here is that there's one data set across the entire front office team, one set of technology, one process for everyone to follow. And you'll see as I take you through the next few slides that actually this consistent approach is actually the cornerstone that you really need to focus on. And in fact, it's step one, is just try and get everyone on the same page and get everyone bought into this approach. So another graphic quite similar to the last, when we look at the different siloed teams and how they start to come together in a world of Rev-Ops, the real takeaway from this graphic is this fourth column. And what you can see here, I think, and probably the most important takeaway here, is that the VP of Rev-Ops sits at the same table as the VP of Marketing, the VP of Success, and VP of Sales. They are not a subordinate function within the organization. If anything, they're more strategic. They've got the vision of how this whole thing comes together. And if you allow them to sit at the same table and take responsibility for the areas that they're strongest at, we move away from this problem issue we see all the time of really good salespeople or really good marketeers, or eventually being promoted up to management and being given a whole host of tasks that really they've just got no business managing. Let the Rev-Ops team own this stuff, because actually that's their area of expertise. And at the same time, let the VP sales actually be responsible for the process of running the sales. So taking away everything that's a distraction, really allowing the VP of Rev-Ops to take ownership of this stuff means that the whole operation runs a whole lot smoother. So let's assume you're all convinced off the back of today, and you want to bring that message home to the teams back at the ranch. The challenge you're going to have is really kind of bringing those benefits, really clarifying that and articulating the benefits to the rest of the business. And so I thought I'd put together just a few bullets here to try and help you with that journey. So I want to focus here on these ideas of the results of putting in a Rev-Ops function. So the first one here is this is all about making better decisions faster. Okay, so if we can get the right data in the right place, we've got visibility of the information we need to make the right decisions. That leads to getting the right data to make those decisions, and every single person is singing from the same hymn sheet. Okay, so you want one single point of truth that everyone buys into, and that sounds obvious, but I don't think I've come across an organization that hasn't struggled with that one. You know, teams are based all over the place, especially during the pandemic. And actually, are they all using the same terminology? Are they all referring to the customer and the challenges that the customers that you solve for the customer in the same way, especially at the key points during the customer journey? And we'll talk a little bit about those as we go. So this is all about building this trust and predictable pipeline. So you want to know what those numbers are going to be. And if you've got the data points, if you've got the visibility of what's going on during every stage, and if everyone's talking about things in the consistent format, then overnight the numbers become a whole lot more predictable. Because you know that when it's not just about an opportunity being at stage 3 of a process, it's much more detailed than that. It's more nuanced. We need to know how much engagement have we got with the relevant stakeholders that are involved in that sales process. So the idea of a linear process that leads to a crescendo where you have a deal and then you can celebrate and forget about it doesn't happen anymore. It's much more about more detail as to how many relationships have you got, how much engagement is going on at each stage. And that can lead to this much more predictable approach to managing your pipeline. And ultimately, it's about closing more deals faster. If you've got a replicatable process in place and everyone knows what's expected of them and they're doing what at the right time, they're saying the right things, you'll see a much more consistent approach to the way you scale. So I wanted to bring this up. There's a lot here to cover, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. And obviously, you know, we can take some of this stuff offline. But I wanted to talk about the 6 pillars of Rev-Ops. These are the areas that, if you take anything away from today, these are the ones I'd focus on. Really getting under the skin of these 6 areas is what's going to help you to get that orchestra playing the same song. You can read them all on the screen here, but you have to get these areas focused on. And in fact, it's not about getting I would encourage you to get all of them to 101 and then all of them to 102 and just keep going as you start to build up the blocks. Getting everyone reading, working from the same data set is obviously vital. You can read this as you go, but having all the reports in place and everyone being managed the same set of KPIs is really important, and that visibility. The tech stack, again, try and have a consistent approach to the tech stack so that everyone, if you're bringing in conversation intelligence tools, well, let's get everyone using them and learning from each other as you go. You can see all these, and there's a whole nother hour we can do on these 6 pillars of Rev-Ops, but I'll leave these and we'll share this deck with you afterwards. So then we start talking about the KPIs, and once again, we could spend another hour on these, and I don't want to dive into them in too much detail. So what I've done is picked out the 3 that I think are most important here to focus in on. And some of them sound pretty obvious here, but these are the 3 that are certainly flavor of the month at the moment. We're hearing a lot of people talking about these 3 KPIs. They're relatively new to the party as well. And really, these are the cornerstones. All of these KPIs are important, but these are the 3 cornerstones I would focus on if I was starting building a Rev-Ops machine from day one. The first is around churn. This should be no surprise. We've got to fix the hole in the bucket, right? So before we start pouring more water in, we've got to make sure that the hole in the bucket is as small as it can be. Really trying to focus in on what that churn number is. Let's be honest with ourselves. And then, of course, we can start to do something about it as we move forward. This really interesting stat about revenue per employee is fascinating, especially when you get into that scale up stage. If you're turning over 10 million ARR at the moment and you've got 100 employees, are you able to? That's 100,000 per employee, which is great. So, but can you get the same level of efficiency when you're at 20 million ARR, or do you need 4 times the number of people to get there? Really trying to make sure that those processes are scalable will make your finance director very happy and really prove out the value of the Rev-Ops function. And then finally, the one I'm most passionate about, this idea of relationships drive revenue. So we all know that if we have more conversations with the right people, we generate more money. But actually, how do you understand that whether that's actually going on? And so we are Ebsta's, the cornerstone of what we do is very much focused on understanding which relationships are trending upwards, which ones are trending down, and really having hyper visibility of which relationships need more attention. So whether it's Ebsta or any other platform, really getting visibility of which relationships you have within the business that you can you can lean on, which ones are where your revenue is coming from, and what relationships need more attention is a really cornerstone KPI. So we then jump on to the revenue machine. This is quite a complex graphic. I'll take you through, but there's kind of 6 points here I think worth picking up on when we start to bring together the entire Rev-Ops or revenue machine. Step one, and the one I've spoken about a couple of times and something I beat the drum on quite regularly, is all around aligning the teams. Are you all using the same terminology? Is everyone referring to the same core proposition, or are people talking about it in slightly different ways? And the larger the organization, the more disparate the teams are, the more different geographies you're based in, the harder this one is. And onboarding is a key component of this. And it's not, it's not you do it once and you're done. This is something you need to revisit, on a regular basis. I'd encourage, at least once a quarter, you need to make sure that all the teams are aligned. You'd be shocked and surprised how often we come across companies that go, where you find people that are talking about the same proposition in very different ways. So once we've got that under control, then it's about mapping the customer journey, right? We've heard this before, I'm sure, but really trying to get into the detail and starting much, much earlier. This isn't about, first meeting onwards. We want to start even earlier. What's the customer journey through marketing? What material are people enjoying? Are they digesting online? How much of the customer journey is happening before they actually speak to a human? And then when they do start speaking to the sales teams, what's that journey look like, and are there any efficiencies we can bring in, all the way through to onboarding the customer, renewing, upsells, cross sells, and so on. And that then brings you right back to the question about what is your ideal customer profile? Because actually it might be easier to sell to customer X, but over multiple years, it might be that customer Y will generate you a whole lot more revenue, or indeed be just a whole lot easier to service, and therefore a whole lot easier to scale. The next step is all around getting the process and the data right at each stage. So, what data points does each resource need at each stage of that process? What information do they need visibility of? Can you simplify down these hugely complicated kind of screens? I know I've seen some frankly ridiculous account screens in things like Salesforce where people are asked to fill in hundreds of different buttons. How can you simplify down the experience and give the people access to the right data at the right time? There are so many data vendors out there that aren't just giving you access to leads, but also insights into what's important to your customer. And if you've got that visibility at the right time, you'd be astounded at how quickly you can reduce that sales cycle and standardize it and speed that process up. Then we get into measurements, right? So once you've actually documented this whole process, now you're at the park, right? Now we're at the starting gates. We can actually do something about it. Once we know what all the stages are, and we've got visibility of what's going on at each step, well, now you can have these incremental improvements. And these improvements don't need to be substantial to have a exponential result. And I'll show you that in the next slide. It's incredible how much more revenue you can generate from just tiny improvements, or at each stage of the sales process or the customer life cycle. Once you've got all this in place, making sure you've got the right tools from the right vendors is obviously important. We've seen the explosion of technology in marketing. Sales tech is also becoming, more and more interesting, innovative tools are out there. You don't want your VP sales being slowed down by reviewing different technologies. Let the professionals do it. Focus on let the Rev-Ops team actually build this stuff out. And then get those feedback loops in, right? So figure out and make sure that you're getting the feedback through to Rev-Ops so that they can improve the process as we go. So I want to, I am coming to an end here, so bear with me. This is quite an important slide. So when we talk about these incremental improvements across the customer life cycle and the impact it can have, you know, this is not about increasing, you don't need to create any more leads at the top of the funnel to have a huge impact on the ARR you can generate at the end, as if you can have these incremental improvements at each stage. So if we can increase our conversion rate from a lead coming into the pipe from 0.3 to 0.35, and increase our conversion rate from 0.2 to 0.24, and you can see where this is going. With the win rate, if we can have that small increase in our win rate from 0.2 to 0.25, it has an impact on our, if we can increase our contract values as well by 20%, the ARR that we generate off the back of this model, out of those same 100 leads, is over double. Okay, so don't underestimate the value of investing in this RevOps engine and building this out. And honestly, if you're not doing it, your competitors are. And so if you really want to get this working for you, you need to be thinking about how you can just use RevOps to really disrupt that space and build that revenue engine to scale. So finally, I thought I'd summarize some of the common challenges that we see that you want to try and avoid. This is all relatively self-explanatory, but you have to get buy-in from the top here, right? We have to get the right stakeholders bought into doing this. And again, when you explain to them, this isn't necessarily about spending more money, it's just about being a whole lot more efficient. Everyone's going to be happy because this isn't just about more revenue and having a much more efficient machine, but actually the valuations of these businesses goes through the roof as well. When as we saw earlier, when you are generating more revenue from the same amount of costs. So make sure that you get the teams aligned. Make sure you've got enough budget to make RevOps actually work, and give the RevOps team the responsibilities they need. Make sure they're reporting into the right people and not just some sort of support function for the sales or marketing teams. Make sure you get those feedback loops coming through as well. And this is not just putting a plaster over a wound here. We are changing the way the commercial teams operate. And if you go all in on this stuff, I guarantee you we've seen phenomenal results out the other end. So I'm going to stop there. Richard, I know there was a lot to take on there. Hopefully it came across, and maybe we'll stop for some questions.
It's perfect. I've had a lot of comments and DMs telling me how good the content's been so far. I've got a lot of good questions as well. Do you want to stop sharing so we can make your face a bit bigger rather than just a Q&A panel? And you can see my big bald head at the same time as well. So first question is from Mika. So what does a RevOps team look like, and how does it scale with company size? What skills are needed? How do you get started building a RevOps team?
Wow, that's a big question, and I think different teams are going to need different resources. Like with any function, start with a leader. Get someone in who has experience in this area. We've just appointed our head of RevOps that we're very proud to have on board. And I remember a conversation when Tony was about to join us, and we talked about what RevOps is, and where we imagine being it was kind of into the lion's den for Tony, because imagine being the finance director of a finance software company. You're a whole lot more than just a finance director, and it's the same as being head of RevOps in a RevOps business, right? So there was always a question as to, well, do I know everything that you want us to achieve here? And the truth is, no one does. Okay, this is all brand new. So just be brave, find someone who is a strategic thinker, and find someone who's a leader, and give them the authority to lead and the resources that they need. And actually part of that is just giving them, centralizing all the disparate tools that the marketing and the sales and success team are leaning on. Let them get their hands around all of this stuff. And then, as I said before, you've got 6 key components to RevOps, what we call RevOps mastery. Let them take responsibility for all of those 6 areas and those incremental improvements over time on each of them. It doesn't need to be a big bang approach, but you need to give them the authority that they need to be able to get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet.
So if we take you guys as an example, what was the tipping point where you were like, okay, now I need to build that role. I need somebody to own that process? Because presumably before you had people doing bits of it. And when was that kind of, okay, we are a large enough organization, or there's a big enough gap for me to fill that with a body?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We found ourselves, different companies are going to have different metrics for this. We found it was a project. We just had more and more revenue related projects, and whether it was marketing, sales, or customer success, there was always a backlog of projects that were required that needed attention. And so once we got to that point, it became obvious that actually this is a key component for us. And honestly, we play in a world with competitors that are a whole lot bigger than us. And so we're constantly trying to disrupt the status quo. And I'm very proud to say we've got we've been able to be very successful at doing that, and we've achieved that by having that kind of intelligent approach to this area. It's not an admin function, right? Rev-Ops is a strategic division in the business, and really has the potential to help you achieve exponential growth.
Next question from Matt Bell. So is VP of Rev-Ops the same as a CRO? I see a lot of CROs with marketing, sales, and support reporting to them rather than at the same level.
So in my opinion, no. I think a chief revenue officer works alongside a VP of RevOps. I think I don't think they're the same at all. In fact, RevOps the people in RevOps don't need to be good at running a sales process themselves. Okay, you don't necessarily need to know how to close someone or negotiate a contract if you're in RevOps. That's a skill of a CRO, and the CRO needs to understand the commercials and be awesome at really driving that side of the business forward. The head of RevOps is responsible for the data, the processes, and the technology that the marketing, sales, and success teams are leaning upon to scale, and will deliver the reports to the chief revenue officer that he needs or she needs to actually run that side of the operation.
So, question from Claire: what size of company would you expect to have a separate RevOps team? It goes back to that kind of tipping point, but is there for most companies, is there a point where you'd say, okay, now you need to start looking at this?
I think it depends on your operation. I mean, I've seen companies that are turning over 20, 30 million with one salesperson, right? Because that's just the type of operation that they run. So, and others that are turning over less than 1 million with half a dozen salespeople. So it just depends on your operation and how and what you're trying to achieve as well. So, look, we are 35 people, and I've got 2.5 people in RevOps for us. But again, we're on a journey to achieve great things. We're trying to change the world, and we're going up against some very big competitors, right? So for us, we want to disrupt what's going on in our market, and so we've invested heavily in scalable, replicatable processes so that we can go from there.
Aidan asked a good question. So typically an organization will already have siloed tech stacks across sales, marketing, etc. How do you best manage the transition given the level of disruption of ripping and replacing tech?
This doesn't need to be a rip and replace, right? I mean, when you're at stage 4 or 5 of the, I didn't talk about too much about the kind of journey we've seen others go through, but you don't need to be a rip and replace on this. Step 1 is let's just get one function responsible for all of it. And once they've got that visibility, it'll become obvious which tools should go across the whole organization. So again, let the operation be responsible for what they're good at, and allow the marketeers to be good at what they do, and allow the sales people to be good at what they do. Square pegs and square holes is what this is all about. And really you need people that are responsible for and committed to these processes to actually take responsibility for them. And maybe in year 2 you'll start consolidating, but step 1 is that there's so many efficiencies that can be brought just by getting everyone singing from the same hymn sheet and communicating in the same way, and taking advantage of the data that you had in marketing across sales, perhaps, if appropriate. So you don't have to rip it out day 1. Let someone do the analysis. You can see small efficiencies as you go, and you'll see, as we saw earlier in that slide I brought up, tiny changes in incremental improvements at each stage of the process can have an exponential impact on results.
That's how the British cycling team won in Beijing, incremental gains. So more marginal gains, I think it was.
Yeah.
Rolf's got a good question. So how is this different to a modern marketing team with a cross-functional growth team targeting improvements at each stage of the customer lifecycle?
Look, we might be talking semantics, and I don't know enough about that particular company setup. What we're talking about is a centralized operation that is responsible for process, data, and technology across marketing, sales, and customer success. And that leads to a consistent message that everyone is saying the same thing to the customers, whether it's in a marketing message during the initial stages of the sales process, in the guts of a sales process, when you're onboarding a customer, renewing them, upselling them, training them. It doesn't matter. What you want is that consistent message all the way across, and someone with enough seniority that can actually dictate to that team. So, for example, in our team, our sales and marketing function reports to Rev-Ops. Okay, and so the Rev-Ops function has the authority it needs to dictate what the message is to these teams. Not necessarily reporting in all guises. The Rev-Ops team aren't responsible for how they actually negotiate a contract. That comes down to the VP sales in our world. But everything when it comes to process and operation, that all reports up to the VP to our Rev-Ops.
So in some organizations, you might see that as like a VP growth type.
Yeah, absolutely. A VP growth is a great title. In fact, I prefer a VP growth than a VP So I prefer a VP I prefer a chief growth officer with a VP sales, VP of RevOps, VP marketing, VP success reporting into chief growth officer. It's kind of the model.
Tony's joined us. If you want to tell her now that we're changing a title. So Robin has kind of made a statement, but I'm going to try and twist it into a question if I can. So do you think that every scale up needs to employ this discipline from the start, and thereby avoid silo conflict at a later stage? So can you lay the foundations and build in and kind of grow into it? Or is it something that you need to be a certain size and then implement?
If you've got the luxury, if you can justify it, the earlier you can justify it, the quicker you'll scale. I read a book recently from, it was about CEOs that go again, that they've kind of had their exit and then they go again. And the biggest learn from that book was just get the most experienced people you can, right? People that know this stuff, right? And that can actually help you run faster. So of course, if you can justify it earlier, great. Of course, it's going to help you to scale faster if you bring in the right resources from day one. Some businesses can't necessarily justify that. And so, we've lived in a world where you build things in an unscalable fashion until they break, and then you make it scalable.
I don't know what you mean. I've never been down that path. So Matt says, which parts of the existing organization show most resistance to this approach? People always feel threatened by change. I can imagine sales, which has traditionally been the alpha dog over marketing and support, feeling a loss of control. Any experience managing this cultural shift?
Yes, we see it all the time, and so you need strong management. And what's really interesting with sales is that they're the first to push back, because exactly as the person who asked the question suggested, sales hate change. But as soon as they make more money off the back of it, it was their idea in the first place, right? And actually, that's why you need strong management, because they're always going to fight change. But as soon as they get an extra dollar in their pocket because of the change that you've implemented, they were the first to back it in the first place. And actually, ultimately, that's what we're here for, right? The whole idea is to generate more revenue from the same function, from the same capital expenditure. We want to become more efficient. This is not putting another layer in place. This is about creating more efficiency so that you can scale without having to spend a whole lot more money on, doubling the number of resources required. Ultimately, salespeople want to earn more money, and so they need to trust in their management team. And while they will grumble, and you kind of got to let them have their grumble, after Q1 they start to see that actually by operating in this consistent fashion, by having that one message, all of a sudden their sales process goes from 2 months to 6 weeks. It can have a huge impact. I mean, if you can imagine, if you can run one sales process at a time, and each one takes 2 months to run, you can do 6 in a year. If you can reduce the sales cycle down to 6 weeks, all of a sudden you're now doing 9 in a year. Okay, so you can imagine the impact you can have and the opportunity for the salespeople to have to earn 50% more revenue. I'll take it overnight, but inevitably, salespeople by definition are short-sighted, and you want them to be, right? You want them focused on the next deal because that's their job. But actually, that's why we take away the responsibility of defining processes and implementing the right technologies and processes and pitches away from sales leaders, because sales leaders more often than not are just really good salespeople. So let's give them to analysts, let's give them to the people that understand this stuff, and allow the strategic thinkers to actually do their job as well.
Jane asks, what skill set would a RevOps person need? So when you're hiring for a RevOps person, what would you look for in that person?
So there aren't very many of them out there, okay, because they don't really exist yet. So try and think about what people were doing before the term RevOps became a thing, okay? So it was the people responsible for the SDR teams. It was the people responsible for all the different products and sales tech and marketing tech, and the people that really were excellent at excelling at getting those tools out there, that actually don't realize they've been in RevOps for a while now, and perhaps they weren't given the authority in the past to do this stuff. So, there is an opportunity to find really good people here that are, very happy getting into the weeds of this stuff, that perhaps haven't had the recognition in the past, that you can then bring in and give them that authority and allow them to kind of flourish and take ownership of these areas.
So sales ops and marketing ops type people?
Yeah, absolutely. But and people that have a track record of actually achieving success, even though they've been fighting the tide of, ego salespeople telling them that actually, that they're not worthy, or not having enough authority to actually make the changes that they want to make. And you can find some very good people that are stuck in other businesses that perhaps aren't adopting RevOps yet, that just want that freedom to really prove the value they can have.
Dave asks, on average, how long would you expect it to take to implement a RevOps strategy in the cogs of an organization? So how long does this process take? If I went,
about a week, and then you're done. No, I'm joking.
Wave your magic wand, it's done.
Yeah, that's right. Ultimately, this is all about, ultimately how long's a piece of string, right? And every organization is different. And even when you've got it all in place, then it's about turning the cogs, okay, and trying to make it, every single stage. Once you've got a data-driven process and everything is measurable and visible all the way through, now you're at the races. Now you're in a position where you can do something about everything, and you can start to turn the cogs. And what we saw in marketing 10 years ago, when I started in business, marketing was a creative art, right? And today, marketing is run by analysts, and everything is A/B tested. Okay, nothing is left to chance. And the same can be applied now to the way sales is run. Sales have bucked the trend for decades. Salespeople, their big egos will tell you that actually, don't leave me alone. I'm running the sales process. Everything's fine. I'm getting really good engagement with the customer. And what they mean is, I'm getting really good engagement with my champion, but not necessarily the finance director or the decision maker. And actually, we need to go away from leaning on the salespeople and their narrative, and we need to start managing these processes by data, making data-driven decisions all across from marketing, as they're who've actually been doing this for a long time, into sales and through to success.
So I think this is in response to the question about pushback before, from Madeline. She says, her suggestion is creating a small team to be part of the implementation process to help drive adoption, then provide feedback and get trained first. By incorporating even a couple of sales reps in the process, they become the cheerleaders for changes. And like we would do the same in an organization as well. Whenever we roll out anything, particularly to sales teams, is use a pilot team and turn them into an internal champion. And it's for sales team in particular, if you can nudge their numbers up, then it will be a much easier process, because everybody wants to be able to do what they're doing. Mika asks a question, or it might be Micah, sorry. What are the common types of tools in the RevOps tech stack?
I also saw a note there that I might be giving salespeople a bad name. I'm a huge fan of sales, and really I want to, this is all about actually enabling sales to do the job that they're here for, and actually, a big fan of what they do. So hopefully that didn't come across too negatively.
It's all right. I know both Aidan and Charlie, and you're right. It's fine. I know them. They are like that.
Okay, well, fair enough. So coming back to the tech stack, it again really depends on the organization, but split it into kind of three components here. Okay, again, I keep repeating the same things, guys. It's data, process, and technology. So in our organization, we've implemented Gong, which was a great tool, and it had a big impact. And again, we saw the pushback, forgive me, from the salespeople initially was, I don't want people looking, watching me, what I do in my sales meeting. And then all of a sudden, as soon as they were able to standardize the way that they pitched and their sales processes reduced, they were huge beneficiaries of this technology. And they were able to take advantage of it and actually, make everybody sing the same song. And all of a sudden their sales processes, their conversion rates improved. I think, again, I think there's going to be different tools for different businesses all the way across the board. Of course, everyone needs Ebsta. That goes without saying. But no,
otherwise you'd be blind to the revenue. So
exactly. You've got no visibility of what relationships are growing and which ones need attention, right? That's kind of what we do. But no, I think, look, different businesses are going to need different tech stacks, and different companies have different budgets available. Technology is not the silver bullet here. It's about getting to grips with what you've got. Trying to get visibility of everything day one, then trying to standardize the way people talk across the organization, get everyone singing the same song, and then trying to use technology to improve the processes as you go, or speed everything up, or simplify the processes as required. So different stacks required across the business, but what we are seeing as what we present Ebsta as a revenue intelligence platform. There are conversational intelligence tools like Chorus and Gong. I'm huge fans of. It's just, again, in a world where we're all working from home, as you can see, we're seeing that any tools that help people to learn and consistently work together are hugely valuable. I don't think I could operate without Slack. I've got other companies that just lean on Teams hugely, and again, a great platform, right? So different tools for different businesses and different budgets. And that's another, we could spend another hour on that stuff.
But it seems like the theme through there though is a tool set that is going to give you visibility and kind of consistent communication across them. So there is going to be a CRM, there is going to be a marketing platform. They might be the same platform, they might be separate platforms, but you need a platform that is going to communicate with the different services and give you visibility across the board, because this is ultimately about visibility and communication.
Well, exactly. Look, ultimately, we're here to help people buy, right? No one likes being sold to, okay? And what we need to do is we just need the visibility all the way through the journey, okay? We need to move away from the narratives of the sales resource or the success team as to how they tell you they're getting on. I went into a business the other day, in fact, it's on our website. So Zoopla is a customer of Ebsta, right? So you can imagine their customer base are all estate agents. And they've implemented kind of QBRs. They have quarterly business reviews with all of their customers as they go through, and that's all great. But actually, under the skin of it, are we actually in those quarterly business reviews? Are we dealing with the secretary, or are we dealing with the principal? And we just don't know. We just don't have that visibility if you're not recording this information. So getting visibility of as much consistent data points across the organization as possible will allow you to make data-driven decisions, and that's what this is all about. If you've got visibility of the data points required, you can make the right decisions and you can incrementally improve. That's what we've learned from marketing in the last 10 years as they've moved to becoming these analysts that have had such a big impact.
See, marketers are the trailblazers now.
Absolutely. I totally buy into that.
Question from Beshad. After implementing Rev-Ops, I can see marketing being located under sales and CS. Why is it like that? Does marketing serve as an infrastructure to sales and CS?
Look, I see it as one function. We're using these old traditional terms, and different businesses are going to operate in different ways. But for me, we've had to be very efficient with our marketing dollars. Okay, so there are companies out there that I won't name that have raised infinite amounts of money, and they can spend money on marketing dollars on all sorts of things. So for us, marketing Ebsta as a brand is really very, very poor return on investment. You just don't get people buying into a particular brand. Now, there are exceptions to that, but for us, we spend our marketing dollars on trying to make trying to promote our teams as thought leaders. So our the members of our sales teams are thought leaders in their space. We're educating them to be at the front of their market around revenue operations. So we want to push their profiles up. We want to, some of you might follow Oliver Squires on LinkedIn. He does some phenomenal videos. And I think we had a video last month, he got over 50,000 views. So spending our marketing dollars on helping our sales team or helping our chief growth officer, our our head of Rev-Ops, helping them to build up their profiles. People care about people. People are interested in listening to what you have to say. And if you can help them get their collateral, their content out the door, we've personally found that's a great use of marketing dollars. So I'm not suggesting that marketing is subordinate to sales and success. It's all just one unit, but different teams are going to work in different ways.
So coming back to that, to the different teams, when you say make sure your team is aligned, do you have any tips on how to review where you are at present? Like how to understand where your starting point is?
Yeah, record your meetings. Go and listen to how people are speaking to their customers. And how is marketing speaking to the customers? How is customer success speaking to the customers? We found one of our guys in customers, as we grow as a business, inevitably there's people that get, things fall through the cracks. And we had one of the guys in customer success that happened to be away or was sick on a particular day when we were educating about some of the new stuff we're doing, didn't know a particular way we were communicating. And we only picked that up because we happened to watch some of the meetings that he was having with his customer. So, visibility, data, making data-driven decisions, understand what people are actually saying, and then help them to improve the way they say it. Standardize your decks so everyone is using the same terminology, the same screens, the same graphics when they're trying to explain your value proposition. Standardize this stuff across the board and then report on it and then monitor it so that you can see what's actually working and what's not.
So you, as Ebsta, have access to a lot of kind of world-class Rev-Ops teams. So what are the biggest, most exciting initiatives you see with Rev-Ops teams working on right now?
So I saw really the big one that kind of really impressed me right in the middle of the pandemic. A lot of B2B sales teams were struggling because everyone just stopped spending money for 3 months. And what it was really fascinating to see. And so we saw a real interesting trend, which I thought was really innovative. And actually, a lot of these companies have continued it on, where they introduced spiffs and bonuses for their sales teams and their customer success teams, in fact, on how many relationships they were building with the right persona at their target audience. So rather than focusing on the outcome, because actually, how much revenue you book for the quarter is a number. Of course, it's important, but actually, it's kind of an outcome. Really, what we need to think about is the inputs. And ultimately, I passionately believe that relationships drive revenue. And so, guess what? If you've got one relationship, you'll generate less revenue than if you've got 1,000 relationships. So, monitoring the strength of each individual's relationships at your target audience and whether those relationships are trending up or down, and then incentivizing that behavior, we've seen to be massively transformative. And actually, again, if you manage the stages and you report on how many relationships people are having, imagine if you could have every salesperson in the organization build 2 more relationships a day. Right at the end of the year, how many more relationships would they have, and how much more revenue would that generate? Right, so really just simple, really simple things to actually have a revolutionary effect by incentivizing the behavior that you want to achieve rather than incentivizing the outcome.
Guy, I'm flat out of questions. So if anybody else has got any questions, get them in quick. If not, while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions, what's the best way for somebody to connect with you or to jump in and try Ebsta?
Yeah, please do get in touch. The final thing I'd say before we jump into that, we've seen a huge shift to account-based selling. Okay, it's been this is probably the biggest change we've seen in the last year or so. So companies en masse have made a conscious decision that they're going to identify every company they're interested in targeting. So that could be 500 companies or 50,000 companies. It doesn't really matter what the number is, but really getting to grips with which companies are you interested in selling to? Who are your ICP, right? That would be step 1. And then step 2 is, right now we know these are the 10,000 companies we're interested in selling to. How many of them have we currently got a relationship with? Okay, and are those relationships trending upwards or trending down? And that's really where Ebsta comes in. The next stage is to, okay, we now know we've got a relationship with these 1,000 companies. What about the 9,000? Well, if you want, let's keep the numbers round. If you know at the end of a year, you want to have a relationship with 10,000 companies, that means every week we need to be building relationships with on average 200 companies. Okay. Now, if you've got 100 salespeople, that's 2 companies per person per week. Okay, and monitoring that and keeping on top of how much they're achieving. and salespeople love a leaderboard, right? So how are they doing? You know, actually this week I got 3 relationships with our target audience. Fantastic, you're at the top of the leaderboard. And really understanding how many relationships they're building and whether they're trending in the upwards or downwards helps you to build a revenue machine, which is what this is all about, okay? Because I can guarantee you, if you want to get involved with 10,000 companies and you've got 200 salespeople, I can guarantee you can put an engine in place that by the end of year 1, you have no white space left, but only if you have a consistent approach to doing it. And that's what Rev-Ops is all about, a consistent data-driven approach to know which of your salespeople are achieving the relationships that you expect them to, and whether that momentum is moving forward or not, and then identifying the salespeople that perhaps aren't built for that, where you can move them into a more of a customer success role because building new relationships perhaps doesn't serve them. But knowing that as early as you can possibly know that means that you can then replace them with salespeople that are comfortable out building those relationships so that you can close in on that white space.
Perfect. Mika has just asked another question, a quick question. So great webinar. Any other resources you'd recommend for learning more about Rev-Ops?
There's a lot of resources out there around Rev-Ops that I suppose I'll post a few up on our LinkedIn. There's a few books I would certainly say are must reads. I haven't got them to hand, but I'll make sure that I'll put a post up in the next 24 hours along with the slides. And if anyone wants to get in touch, you can get through to me at either on LinkedIn or guyrubin@ebsta.com.
Perfect. Guy, that was brilliant. And I think you've definitely answered the question, what is Rev-Ops? We'll have to get you back again at some point.
Thank you very much for hosting me, Richard. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. What we'll do is we'll follow up with the recording and the slide deck, and I'll reach out to Guy and kind of get those resources, and we can put those in the follow-up email to get that out to everybody as well. Thanks, Guy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.